Who else stands to win when this problem gets solved? Welcome to Sales for Nice People. You may have been in situations where you're talking to a buyer who is really keen on getting your work. They understand the project that you're proposing, they think that the money is available, and they keep talking to the other stakeholders in the company, but they keep getting shot down. When you're in a situation like that, it is extremely helpful to ask your buyer who else stands to win when this problem gets solved. Because obviously, when somebody buys a solution to a costly, difficult, challenging problem, that person is then the one who made the decision to get this problem solved, and that is a personal win. Now, for your buyer, that is all very well and good. But if this buyer doesn't get the buy-in from other people in the organization, then they are stuck, and so is your deal. But if you then have a conversation with your buyer about how solving the problem would represent a personal win for other people in the organization, they might just be able to have a conversation with those stakeholders that drives the deal forward. So for instance, imagine you're talking to an HR director and she is really keen on getting a 2-day workshop because a recent round of layoffs has left some cultural damage and there are some morale problems, leadership is being challenged, and she knows that if she gets the workshop from you, that is all going to improve. But the CEO won't agree to any spending until the next round of investment is landed, and the COO won't agree that people take 2 days off work for a workshop because she insists on hitting the deadline of a new product launch. And there you are with your buyer who is completely stuck and unable to move the deal forward despite really wanting your help. Now, if you then ask your buyer who else stands to win when this gets solved, you might be able to have a conversation that enables your buyer to have the right conversations internally that gets the stakeholders on board. So in a case like that, you could tell your HR director lead, hey, but if we solve the morale problem, then it is much more likely that your COO is going to hit the deadline for the product launch with much less problems and fallout. And it's much more likely that your COO can focus on raising the round instead of having to chase people up in order to provide the reports and the data they need to raise the round in the first place. Now, your lead will have a view on how buying from you is going to make things better for other people, other stakeholders in the organization. So if you have this kind of conversation with your buyer, you can then say something like, well, would it be helpful if I create a 1-page report with some very summary case studies of how we have solved culture problems and enabled fundraising and product launches by improving culture? That way you can take the PDF into your next board meeting and maybe have a conversation about actually getting this workshop. Would that be helpful? Now, your HR lead is probably going to say, yes, that makes a lot of sense. No idea if it works. But you're now providing them with a tool that they can take into the company, into conversations, into a board meeting, in order to have the kind of conversation they need to have to get the stakeholders on board, right? Sales happen in the context of a conversation. And very often the conversation needs to continue when you're not in the room. People need to go into their own conversations internally and have the right conversation. So your lead needs to sell you onto other stakeholders. And by having a conversation with your lead about how others can win and what tools you might provide to enable them to have the right conversations, you'll now be able to unlock a deal, and doesn't guarantee that it's going to happen, but it's much more likely than if you were to simply say, well, sorry to hear it. I wish that your CEO and COO would be on board. See you next time. Have a conversation with your lead about who else stands to win when this problem that you can solve gets solved. This is Sales for Nice People. I'll see you again tomorrow. And go to salesfornicepeople.com/sign up, where you can get a short daily email.